Right, hi boys. Societal context. It's a pretty abstract term. So what does this mean? And this is one of the key distinctions in getting excellence for this assignment. It's not only the interactions, understanding how biology influences cognition and stress and resilience and vice versa, but also, well, how do we use this, right? Excuse me, that's me getting a text message. So by hopefully, first goal, right, by the end of this little video, you'll know what do we mean by a societal context. And by the end of today's lesson, you should have found at least one example, right? And it's really important, find an example and let me check it, show me, and then I can give you feedback. Yes, you're on the right track. No, you need to continue. I'd aim for about 3 examples of well-explained societal contexts. So I always like the rule of 3s. It shows a good range of understanding without having to go too deep. We could talk forever about this stuff. So what does societal context mean? Remember, this is defined in the glossary in your task sheet. But society, the real world, right? Context, right? I mean, the environment. So real world environments or situations. That can be any way in which the findings that you're explaining have been or could potentially be used in the real world. All right, so that means, say for example, could this be used in education? Could it be used in clinical practice and therapy for treatments? Could it be used in occupational psychology, like the workplace, stress training, right? Anger management, that's really more for criminology. But these are just some possible examples, right? Maybe public policy, heart disease. We've talked about chronic stress. Men, dying from heart disease. Heart disease is on the rise. Cardiovascular disease and how it links to stress. So how could what we've been learning or has it been applied in some way? And looking at the recent research on ACEs coming out and socioeconomic status. Apologies if you hear my kids in the background. So the key question to think here is how might the knowledge of the explanations and interactions be used in some way? That's your first question. And then you're going to go do some research and try to find some examples. Right, here's an example, and this is in the textbook actually. If you wanted to include it, you'd need to write about mindfulness. But neuroplasticity research, right, shows, so we know people in prisons have abnormalities in their prefrontal cortex and their amygdala, and so prisons have actually introduced mindfulness to try to restore and improve the activity in those parts of the brain. This is a societal context. We're not just finding out this stuff in the laboratory, we're actually going applying it and improving society in some way, right? And that's the goal of psychology, right? Understanding real world behavior. Okay, and so and also this is quite interesting, this might be used to reduce recidivism rates and determine whether or not someone should be let out of prison based on their brain scans or based on their biological profile. Okay, now you could almost get into the discussion of, well, that's ethical issues, right? And if you've seen the movie Minority Report, okay, is it right to use brain scans to determine if someone should be let out of prison? What if we got to the point where we could use brain scans to find out if people were likely to commit a crime, so we lock them up before they even had a chance to? Anyway, now this is an example. A real quick Google search of locus of control training finds this article here, Learning to Learn Online, using locus of control to help students become successful online learners. That's an example of the findings being used in a societal context. Now, the phrasing from the NCA is that it's the interactions in a societal context. So ideally, you'd be looking at some sort of interaction that you've discovered and explained and applying that in a societal context. But if you're stuck, then just use any of the theories or studies. Third example, Jameson's research on the biopsychosocial model. And that's actually, he did a follow-up study on college education and math training. Okay, and so that could actually be applied, if we can train people to how to use the BPS model. Something's going on here with my slides, I don't know. What is going on? Okay, now there are some other examples in the textbook. We didn't cover these, sleep, diet, and exercise, and that's because they don't really fit nicely into an approach. If you're completely lost finding societal context and applications of the findings from what you've covered, which you shouldn't be, but if you are, and you're interested in sleep, diet, and exercise and how it links to stress and resilience, give these pages of the textbook a read. And you'll see here there are things like the Mediterranean diet. Well, that has real societal impacts, and sleep deprivation, how that could have an influence, and exercise. So while these don't apply nicely, because, is sleep, is that environmental, is that sociocultural, or is that biological, right? Or diet, what's that? Is that biological? We're putting it in our body, but is it sociocultural? So that's why I didn't include them in those approaches, but they actually do make a good link to the societal context. So if you're really stuck for the other examples. Okay, that's all. I hope that is helpful. Let me know if you've got questions.